Coming to paperback and e-readers this Black Friday, E-Steam Ascension, The Devilish Dealer reaches a turning point in our life in this powerful E-Steam series story at E-Steam Ascension at online bookstores this Black Friday. In a previous video, I talked about creating non-SJW black characters, and in this video I'm going to talk a bit more about creating black female characters that aren't SJWs. Now, in the Diversity in Comics video that inspired me to make this video, he was talking about how Mark Waid had created black women to be props in a Captain America comic. And the reason why he created these black women to be props in that Captain America comic is because he didn't know much about black women. And this is what happens when a writer doesn't know anything. They go by what they think they know about someone. And when I look at that character, it looks like it's something that comes from what he thinks he knows about black women. Now, a guy like me, I know black women. I live with black women. I've interacted with black women. So when I create a black female character, that character becomes a person to the reader. And the places I draw for creating my characters comes not only from my experiences with black women, but from things I have seen in black media and my interactions with black people online. So I have multiple sources of reference for creating black female characters, and that's why in many cases those black characters resonate with people. For example, I created this character called E-Steam, and this character, E-Steam, is one of my most popular characters in the SJS Direct imprint. She's very popular on Smashwords, and people, whenever I release an E-Steam series book, always run to download it. Now, the E-Steam character was inspired visually by actress Sally Richardson Whitfield. Now, actress Sally Richardson Whitfield was the voice of Elisa Maza on Gargoyles. And back in 1994, when I was watching Gargoyles after I graduated college, the first thing I remember about it was her voice, and her voice really stuck to me. And as I did a bit more research, I learned that Elisa Maza was played by Sally Richardson, and then I also learned that Goliath was played by Keith David. And when I heard her voice, that's one of the things that inspired me to create the E-Steam character. And it didn't hurt that she was extremely attractive, because after I watched Gargoyles, I picked up a VHS of A Low Down Dirty Shame, and I saw how attractive Sally Richardson was, and that's what really inspired me to create the E-Steam character, who started out as a villain in the first ISIS story. And the E-Steam character started out that way because I really liked the way Sally spoke, and I liked the way she was so well spoken, and I wanted to create this kind of smart, think she knows everything she demon who was out to undermine her lord, Lord Seth, who was one of the lords in Lucifer's Legion, and get power for herself. And I wanted to create this bad guy because I know that actors usually, primarily, this is how they become popular, by playing the heel role. And after watching several of Sally's films, I saw how great an actress she was. And I thought, she would be great as a Disney villain. So that's one of the things that led to me creating this E-Steam character and creating the She-Demon. But as the character evolved in books like The Temptation of John Hayes, I started to see the potential for the character, and that's when I started to do the E-Steam series, and I started to show the character's transformation arc. And all of that was done because I just got inspired by hearing Sally Richardson's voice in Disney's Gargoyles. Now, I also create characters based on people I know, and one of the characters I created based on a person I know was the Doc Flowers character, who was a supporting character in the ISIS series. And the Doc Flowers character was inspired by Professor Flowers, who was one of my teachers at Monroe College. And Professor Flowers taught me Introduction to Business, and she also taught me organizational behavior. And the way she taught had such an impact on me that I wanted to pay tribute to this professor in a character. And I did that in not only the ISIS series, but in also the novel The Thetas. And with the Doc Flowers character, she's this older woman who's highly intelligent, but she's also skilled with different areas of culture, and she's also really spry and agile, and she's often a foil for Isis and a nice contrast because Isis is an immortal. And now you have the Dark Flowers character who's elderly, but is also wise in other ways. So both characters kind of play off each other, but that character was created by a professor in my college. And whenever I create black women, I also sometimes I draw from women that I know in the neighborhood for personalities. I draw in the neighborhood for voices, and from my experience interacting with black women, not only in my personal life and things in media and online, I've learned that there's a diversity of black women, and you just can't go by one thing. With SJWs, they always go by one thing. Either they go by the Magic Negro, which is designed to make them not appear to be a racist, or they go into aspects of black characteristics that they see, like they'll see the loudmouth, sassy black woman, and they'll make that one characteristic the only characteristic of that character, and that makes for a one-dimensional person because they don't know that person as a person. Me, I went to high school with black girls. I went to elementary school, junior high school. I got to know them as people. I know why people act the way they do. I know why they behave the way they do. And I can really get into different aspects of their character, and that's what leads to them becoming richer and more multidimensional. And I know that black women come from different walks of life. There's a whole spectrum of aspects of life that black women come from. You have the working sisters, you have the strong, independent black woman, you have the hood rat, you have the baby mama, you have all sorts of black women, but usually SJWs focus on the ones like I've just mentioned because that's what they see on the outside. They don't see the other parts of the black community, which are there's the black girl next door. They don't want to talk about her. There's the boho black woman. There's the African American goth, and that was one that I focused heavily on the last 2 or 3 years because I wanted people to know that there are black people who are living a darker lifestyle and enjoying the dark aspects of life in the goth subculture, and that's why I created the Matilda Crowley character. And I drew inspiration again from media that I saw. I mean, one of the things that inspired me was seeing actress Persia White in an interview, and she was talking about how she's so dark because she's so light skinned. And that was one of the things that resonated with me because as a light skinned man, I've lived on the darker side of life, and I wanted to talk about the dark side of light skin. I did that in a novel called Spellbound, where I talked about the dark side of light skin and this character's journey as she starts her journey into the goth subculture, and that being one of the reasons for her becoming a part of the goth subculture. So when I get inspiration from things, I also get ideas from media, but I also get ideas from my personal life, and I created the Matilda Crowley character to be a girl next door. And I also drew from other sources, like when I saw an image of Tia Mowry with her father, and that also led into the creation of the Matilda Crowley character, and gave me ideas for how to take this character into this goth subculture and this different life. And I wanted the voice to be strong. I wanted the personality to be strong because I wanted people to see how this girl next door transformed into the goth subculture and started expressing her darkness on the outside because she was already darkly inclined, but she was going to show how she felt inside on the outside. And this is something that people didn't really understand about people in the goth subculture, is that they already have a dark view of life. It's just that they're showing it on the outside, and that's what you see expressed in their clothing and their appearance. And this is what a lot of SJW people, they would just look at the outside of the person and go with that, but they really wouldn't dig deep on to find the internal character traits. Now, when I write black women, I go and I try to dig deep on the inside for the character traits that make them relatable to people. So when I was writing the East Team character, I started out with this woman who became a she demon, but I showed why she became the she demon. It was related to many of the issues as related to her family, because she was the princess of Keisha, and then her nation was destroyed by Osiris and Ra, and then she was adopted into their family, and then she believed she was rejected by Osiris, and these father issues are what led to her becoming this she demon. And this is all stuff that led to her thinking that she had to go down this road because at the time in ancient Egypt, Osiris was considered God. So she thought if God rejected her, she had to become this demon. And it wasn't until the temptation of John Haynes that she meets John Haynes. And then what happens is his example of Christ is what inspires her to change. And that's why she decides to go down the road and start working towards salvation. That's what we see in the East series. Her transforming into this character until eventually to the point where she finally breaks away from Lucifer's Legion. And starts growing in her relationship with Christ. That's what we see with the East character. And that's all part of the character transformation arc I created for the character because, as I see it, when you're writing black female characters, you want to have a character transformation arc. That's something that is really lacked with superheroines and superhero women, regardless of race, but I wanted that to be a major part of this East character. I also wanted it to be part of the Isis character, and that's why I created the whole concept of the goddess next door. Now, the Isis character, excuse me, in contrast to the Eastine character, she was supposed to be born to fulfill this destiny as the sword of Nubia. Unfortunately, because she was born human, what happened was she wound up growing up to become a slave in the Nubian palace, but that was working towards creating her to learn more about humanity, and she thinks more human than Eastine. Eastine tends to think more like a goddess, but she thinks more like a human. It's a contrast in the dichotomy with those characters. And because she has learned human things, she tends to think of things from a human perspective. And with the whole goddess next door concept, I wanted to make the whole concept that this Isis was a hero and a friend because after she immigrated to America, she became a part of America, part of American culture. She dealt with struggles like racism, she dealt with Jim Crow, and she dealt with all sorts of aspects of black culture. So she knows about black culture and she wants to help black people. And as a black woman, she sees herself as a person who can help out in the community. She's supposed to be a friend to the community, the goddess next door. Whenever there's a problem, she's there to help people out. And when I create black women, when I created the Isis character, I wanted her to be that girl next door, the friend, the kind of characters I used to see with Denise Huxtable, Tia and Tamara Mowry, and Hillary from The Fresh Prince, and many other black girls I even knew in the neighborhood. These were girls next door. These were friends, and the power that they had was to inspire people to do better and do things to help people out so that they could learn what they needed to know so they could move on with their lives. That's the whole foundation of the whole goddess next door concept with Isis. And her character transformation arc really is about her learning how to help people in the community today because she left the community for a brief moment in the book Death of a Theta because her original alias, Andrea Thomas Robinson, had gotten too old and it couldn't go on. So she had to leave the community for a brief moment. Now she's coming back to try to reconnect with the community towards helping deal with the issues of the community, black community, in the 21st century. And in this character transformation arc, she's learning about the community, she's learning about people, and she's learning about going where she's needed. And this all comes from my whole concept of creating these rich, multidimensional black women. Because when it comes down to, again, black heroines or black female characters in comics, they oftentimes don't really give them any sort of depth. They don't really give them any sort of personality. And a lot of writers do that again because they've never really experienced black women. They've never had interactions with too many black women. Usually, a lot of the writers, what happens is the only black woman they know is the sassy black woman who sits at the counter of the store, or the administrative assistant with the kids, or the receptionist. They coming from their frame of reference. When I come from my frame of reference, it's coming from numerous black women I've had interactions with. When I was working at AmeriCorps, I ran into numerous educated professional black women who had different aspects of life. Yes, there are educated hood rats, and then there are sophisticated black women. There are black elite women, and then there are intelligent black women like the professor at Monroe College I had an interaction with. And then there are working class sisters who are just trying to get through a day. And then there are girls next door. So there are all aspects of life I've run into. And when I even run into African American Goths at the library. So I've seen a whole spectrum of black women. And when I write stories about black women, I can really dig deep into the well as related to creating their characters' personalities, their voices, and the experiences they have in life because I'm coming from different experiences I've had in my own life and places I've gone, places I've seen. So I can really show people, a bigger picture as related to the black female image. Because when I would go out here and I would buy books related to black female image, usually they would be things like your Terry McMillan's Waiting to Exhale, where they would show you this single, successful, well educated black woman who couldn't get a man. That's all I would see for the last 10, 15 years. And then later on now, I'm seeing all these books talking about relationships with white men, and again, these are all only giving you one narrative, and they're not giving you a complete story of black women, black culture, and the black experience. And in comics, we really get a really limited picture because we really don't get to see that many stories. I mean, we get a Misty Knight who was on the arm of an Iron Fist most of the time, or we get Monica Rambeau, who really needs to get more exposure because she's one of the better developed and greater characters who is a black heroine. And she had a great story in the early '80s issues of Avengers where we saw her growing into her powers and then learning how to work on a team like the Avengers, and eventually I think taking a leadership role in the Avengers. And she was a great heroine at Marvel. And then we had Vixen, and then we had Storm. And we really, when it comes down to black heroines, there aren't that many, but the stories that really hurts the diversity as it relates to black women. Me, I've seen a diverse array of black women in my life. I've experienced a diverse array of black women in my life, and that's why I can tell different stories about different black women, like Cassandra Lee, who was a baker who was in downtown Brooklyn, Isis, who was a goddess next door, Eastine, who was a devilish diva, um, Matilda Crowley, who was an African American goth, Colleen Anderson, who was pledging a black sorority, or Nikki Desmond, who was a rich girl in Beverly Hills, or Marilyn Marie, a washed up child star, because these are stories that I have read about, these are stories I have experienced, and when I write black female characters, I draw from all of these different things, and that's what leads to you seeing a richer and more diverse picture as related to the image of African American women. This is what I wanted to contribute to comics as a writer, because a long time ago I aspired to be a comic book writer, and the ISIS series was originally intended to be a comic book, and that was based on some ideas I had for a run of Wonder Woman comics, and the East Team series was originally based on ideas I had related to this devilish diva, but they were originally meant to be ideas for a Lois Lane, because a lot of people, they would think Lois Lane comics are kind of lame, but I saw a way to make it fresh for the 21st century, and to my surprise, people have East Team has resonated with a lot of people, and the whole Lois Lane in the 21st century concept, it really went over well. I took some aspects of Monster High and took the whole Monster High grown up, and that's also another part of the East Team series, and it's really resonated with readers over the last couple of years as I've published these books on Kindle and Smashwords. People really like them, and whenever I write black women, you just don't get magic Negroes or sassy black women or black women who are just there just to be black. You get rich, multidimensional characters who give you a panoramic picture of life as a black woman and black culture, and it's kind of a surprise to many people. For people when they read my stories, like I had one person said on the Thetas, they said they were surprised to hear that a black man could write a black woman and the character could come to life so effectively. They were just surprised about that. But this is just me drawing from my experience and the black women in my life, the black women in my family, the black women who I've had interactions with in the community, and the black women I've had interacting with online. And that's what you see in many of my stories because I draw from those sources and I also draw from my own research. And that's what makes great black female heroines. And heroines is something that I have been studying for years. I studied superhero women from Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. And I really wanted to put a fresh take on heroines. And that's one of the things I try to do in many of my stories. Now, when it comes down to these SJW writers, again, the reason why their black women come across as so flat is because these guys, again, have really no real frame of reference. I can really see it in guys like Brian Michael Bendis as Riri Williams, and I could see it with this Mark Waid black female that he put in Captain America. And I can see it in numerous other characters that these writers really, they're coming from a place that they don't know black people, and if they want to write better black people, the best way to do that is to go out here and interact with black people. If you want to pick up my books in the ISIS series or the E-Steam series, or you want to pick up the Foundation for the SJS Direct Universe, The Temptation of John Haynes, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com in the description box. And if you want to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, the legendary Mad Matilda. Get the conclusion to the Spinsterella trilogy at online booksellers today.